Thank you. Thank you. So Carrie's a hard act to follow, but I at least want to respond to your favorite Peapod moments, because I have one of my own, but it's not a shopping experience. My actual first speaking engagement once I left J&J was at a Peapod vendor summit down in Maryland. And it was sort of a last minute thing. I was given the presentation, get on the train, learn it on the way down, and deliver it, fine. But I brought with me, I had just gotten back from Internet Retailer, and one of my favorite pieces of swag from the expo floor was a shirt that said, "I shop in my underwear." And I love that shirt because it's such a key insight into the online shopper. But during the Q&A, I believe it was the head of operations said, we don't have a problem with people shopping in their underwear. We have a problem with people answering the door in their underwear and losing drivers for an hour thereafter. So that was probably my favorite my favorite Peapod moment. But anyway, so thank you very much. What was really interesting about that Peapod Summit was probably 2-3 years ago, was at the time it was mostly Ahold sales reps who have Peapod. And they were like, it's like 1% of my business, I really don't care about it, but somebody made me come, and so I'm gonna listen and hear what they have to say. And I really think that as we've already heard both Gary and Carrie mention, we've really come a long way just in the last 2 years. That early adopter phase is coming to an end, and we are reaching that critical tipping point. So this is that adoption curve that Gary was referring to. And by and large, anyone you talk to at this point, particularly in the US, is saying we've and certainly outside the US, but here we're here. Right? This was where a lot of the early adopters, the first movers, were kind of figuring out e-commerce in the CPG space. Now it's moved from a question of not if and when, but how. I want to know how to do it because I know that this is a must. This is something that I have to do. But it is still early days. Even as much as we are seeing this tip, the playbooks are still being written. And so as really the thought leaders in e-commerce being in this room, it's a challenge that all of us have collectively to write those playbooks and continue to push the bounds of our retail partners as well as our marketing and internal partners on what e-commerce could be and what it should be. There's a constant flow of innovation and new technology that's driving behavior shifts that will keep the industry in turmoil for the foreseeable future. So while a lot of us who have been in the CPG industry for some amount of time have become very familiar with this, we know how to manage the physical aisle. We are somewhat uncomfortable and unfamiliar with this, right? What does going from this to this mean? And I want to talk about that for just a minute. So the days of stack 'em high and let 'em fly, right? That was how we used to manage the space. Plant says, okay, we're going to make so much product, and the sales guy goes out and sells the product into the retailer. Everybody high fives them. I've landed a promotion. We're going to push a display out to store or a pallet at Walmart. In comes the shopper, and they see the end cap and the display, and they buy, and they go home, and they're happy. That has really turned on its head in the e-commerce world, and it's really important to understand this when you think about how to set up your online shelf. Nowadays, it's in e-commerce, it's all about how you set up the item. That is the most critical part of whether or not you're successful in e-commerce. It's why you're all here today, and it's what we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about in the next couple days. Why is that? Because then consumers go online and they're doing their research for the product. They're doing a search, they're using the navigation menu, whatever it may be. They're looking for a category or a product. Then they make their decision to purchase, and that's what triggers the turn order. So I'm getting a little bit supply chain focused here, but it's really important to think about that we no longer can really push our online retailers like we can an offline retailer to take a big slug of product just because we think it's going to be a big deal or there's a big promotion. You've got to really generate that demand. And the only way you're going to generate that demand is if the shoppers can find your product and they're convinced to purchase it. So in a pull environment, which is really what we've shifted to, with the exception of some amount of the media opportunities and promotions opportunities that are there, category-specific best practices are absolutely critical in your setup process in order to win. And the real implication there is it's still one item at a time. And what do I mean by still one item at a time? Does anybody know what the very first recorded e-commerce transaction was? I learned this last night. Anybody? Yeah, it was cannabis, marijuana. That was actually the first recorded online e-commerce transaction. But rapidly behind that, what largely filled in the void was catalog-based retailers. And if you think about the e-commerce model, we really haven't evolved that far. Walmart, Target, Amazon, Peapod, it's one item at a time. You can search the category, there's regimen plays that you can make, but at the end of the day, the point of purchase happens when you're looking at a single item at a time. Your content looks great, by the way, guys. And that's really important to keep in mind because at the end of the day, that decision to purchase is happening at the single item. So what does that mean? It means that we have to take category management that we understand from the brick and mortar world. And there's a translation process, which Carrie mentioned as well, in terms of understanding what that means in the online space. So we take distribution and assortment. So in the traditional channel, you're measured on how many new points of distribution did you get? Do you have a banner versus checkerboard? What does your shelf set look like? Are you on the top shelf? Are you on the left? Online, you really can set up just about anything. And what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is should you, and how do you go about choosing, and what's the right way to set up those products. The physical shelf, what does that 4 feet look like, and where are you in that 4 feet, and how many items do you have? Well, now it's really about your page content, because the product's already up there, but your opportunity to convert and to educate is within the page itself, the content. Whereas before, we're focused on planogram, and you want to be top left or in the bullseye or whatever the brand strategy is. Now it's all about menu and search. You want to make sure that when somebody's searching for your product, whether they're using navigation or keyword, your product is discoverable because you don't have that aisle to wayfind to, and you don't have the 4-foot set to navigate and find your product from. The world of fixed price has largely come to an end. I think we all know this. It's all about dynamic pricing. As frequently as every 2 hours, every 1 hour, sometimes in real time, those prices can constantly change. So it's no longer a static environment where prices change maybe twice a year. It's a constant battle, and really understanding how that price dynamic works is critical to managing your online category. And finally, and this one is perhaps a little bit more of a stretch in some ways, but when I think about promotions in the online store, that's about interrupting the trip. So someone's going in and they're saying, I've decided I'm going to go to the store and buy shampoo. Hair care is my favorite category to talk about. I'm going to, we use the same barber, don't we? So the idea there is I'm going to go to the store, and on my way to the shelf, I get interrupted by a display. I get interrupted by a shelf tag. I get interrupted by an IRC, whatever it may be. Well, in the online space, there's not as many opportunities to do that, and the online shoppers largely come to ignore banners and skyscrapers and all the other noise that's going around. They're just focused on the middle of the page. But ratings and reviews have that same interrupting factor, because if you search page 1 and it's a new category to you, you might do a first scan of what all the ratings and reviews are. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but think about ratings and reviews as a way to interrupt the trip and to really be a point of differentiation versus your competitors. Okay, so let's talk about what this means in terms of how you actually drive results in the category management space. So there'll be no surprise here. There's a nice fit and alignment to Clavis core metrics. When you think about portfolio and availability, the insight here is you want to make sure you've got the right product in the right online store, and once you've got that picked, staying in stock every day, which any of us in the room know is no easy feat. Staying in stock with online retailers is very tricky. Placement. So this is all about share of search. It's also about share of navigation or menu. You want to be on page 1, and placements 1, 2, or 3 is gold. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. Claire's going to talk about it a lot tomorrow as well, but search and your placement on the page being all critical. Price. There's less opportunity here, particularly overseas, but it's same thing in the US, to actually influence price. This is one place where it gets really tricky and you can get yourself into trouble super fast. There's a lot of room around promotions, but your day-to-day price, there is still opportunity to influence it if you have a true control of your market, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Ratings and reviews, all about understanding your brand efficacy, how consumers and shoppers think about your product, what's the loyalty factor, there's an engagement opportunity there. We generally say you want somewhere between 20 and 25 reviews and probably 3.5 stars or better. If you're down below 3 stars, shoppers are really going to start to dismiss you out of hand. If you have less than 20 reviews, the rating itself loses credibility. So if you only have 5 reviews on the product, the shopper's less likely to believe what that average rating looks like. And finally, content. So this is all about education. It's all about consideration. It's making sure that you've got your fundamentals in place, your images and copy are accurate and up to date, and you have engaging content where possible. So I'm going to dive into those, and then I'm going to apply the principles of online category management to it. Right assortment. So these are some of the I've been doing e-commerce for a few years, and kind of, I think a lot of this will be very logical when you think about it, if you don't already have some of these guiding principles in mind. But what is the right assortment? The age of the endless aisle is really coming to an end, right? That's our theme today. And when we think about it, we've heard universally from every manufacturer, it doesn't matter if you're the biggest or the smallest, if you've got a product where the 15-to-1 ratio isn't working, and Amazon doesn't articulate it that way, but effectively that's what it is, it craps out. Can't realize a profit, right? And it doesn't matter how big you are and how much money you're throwing at it, if you're selling a very heavy product at a very low price point and the retailer can't make a profit, they're just not going to keep it on their site. The 15-to-1 ratio is kind of what we've seen from observing. It's probably not a coincidence. It kind of correlates to a book. So you think about particularly in the Amazon model, but it actually carries over. If you have products, and I think about my J&J days, who I can pick on because nobody from J&J's here, Listerine was sort of our poster child for what doesn't work in e-commerce. It's heavy, it's low price, and it's got alcohol in it, so it qualifies as hazmat. That's a product where you might not want to focus on that with online retailers, but your grocery delivery retailers, it's perfect for. That product is going to sing on Peapod. It's going to sing on Amazon Fresh. And so you've got to start to think about what's the right product for the right retailer. It's not just putting everything out in every place. What's the optimal case pack? Is it a 1? Is it a 3? Is it a 6? And do you need frustration-free packaging to overcome that weight issue? We're seeing more and more suppliers come into the space now who've solved for how to ship glass, how to ship cans. It's a lot of heavy corrugate, it's a lot of padding, and it's a lot of cost, but it's, for some of these manufacturers, it's the only way that they can play online. Dog food is a really good example. You've got to be there with canned dog food, but if you can't make the configuration work and help the retailer make a profit, sometimes frustration-free packaging is the only way to do it. And by the way, that's Amazon's term. They've kind of written the standard for it, but the idea here is e-commerce ready packaging. Depth versus breadth. So I think you're getting the point here. It's really about, you've kind of got to make that decision. Do you want your entire portfolio and you're going to try and focus on all of them, give them a little bit of time? Or do you want to get the right 5 products that make up 80% of your sales and get those 5 100% right? So you've got to kind of have that debate, what's the right selection there? And then this part, I think a little bit more probably common knowledge. You know, your categories are going to do better are high involvement, perhaps discretion categories, and daily usage. So those are sort of the 3 things. High involvement, they're going to go online, they're doing education, they want to learn more about it. Discretion, you think about family planning, those kinds of categories where maybe you don't want to spend all day standing in the aisle. And last, daily usage. If this is something you're buying over and over and over again, like razor blades, it's the kind of thing that shoppers are increasingly trained to go online and try and find a deal, get it on subscription, and just have it come without having to even think about the purchase. Also, you know, your new launches, of course, people are seeking information, products that are in low supply or niche, that long tail and hard to find. From the earliest days of e-commerce, these have always been the best performers. Starting to see this catch up, but very often the first thing that manufacturers learn when they go online and look at what their sales are is that they're hard to find niche products are the ones that are their best sellers online. Now, as we're getting more mature about it, in the industry, the industry is getting more mature, starting to catch up, and we've got more of our main products catching up in terms of sales and sales velocity. And last, you know, this can't be understated, and I'm sure a lot of you face this internally, that product strategy and your online category management approach, it has to be understood internally. It has to be part of the business planning process, and it has to be funded. This isn't the kind of thing where we're just going to give somebody a part-time job, they're going to manage online commerce, get everything up there, fix, you know, set it and forget it and move on. This is really something that marketing can use as a really critical part of their business planning process, and should be well funded and appropriately funded to make sure that they're maximizing that opportunity. Okay, so that's product and availability. Search was the next thing I talked about. We, as everyone knows, Clavis rolled out this year menu. We call it menu in the US. I think we think about this more like navigation or left-hand nav. And a lot of times, one of the first questions we get when we're with customers is, well, what do I really care about navigation for? Everybody uses keyword, right? What I would say is it's a 70-30 split. But the reality is whether it's 70-30 to keyword or to navigation absolutely depends. And if you don't believe me, think about for a minute the last time you weren't on Amazon but you were on another retailer, how you shopped. If you go to a clothing retailer, I'm going to go to men's first, then I'm going to go to maybe shirts, I'm going to go to sizes, I'm going to use the navigation because I don't know what shirt I'm looking for because it might be a new style or a new design. When I was looking on 11 Main when it launched a few months ago, I wanted to know what they carried in health and beauty. I'm not going to search for like Dove. I'm going to go in health and beauty and see all the products that they carry. The 70% or higher on keyword is really a phenomenon to Amazon because there's so much spear phishing, as one of our customers like to call it. They know exactly what they want and they're going to search for it. So our answer to this is it depends. It's an area that we're going to be doing some research on in the next 6 months, so we can actually come back to you on a point of view. But our hypothesis is that how shoppers search depends on 4 things. The retailer and what their strength is and their category, what the trip mission is, whether they're just sort of a casual shopper or they know exactly what they want, what the shopper maturity and preference is and how well they know this space, and finally the category itself. We know that there are some categories that lend themselves to keyword search. There's some categories that lend themselves to navigation. Okay, so that's search. Just a few examples of discoverability via search. This is always, a fun slide to put up. And we've all done this in our own category. You search for soda on Amazon, and we all probably in this room know the story with Surge that launched just a few weeks ago and sold out, and then it was back, and then it sold out. Number 1 seller, we'll see Pepsi's product right up there shortly with the product that they're launching soon. Coke, number 2, this is a prime pantry item, so really interesting that that's already gotten up into the top search rankings. And by the way, this is for the top 100 products under soda. But this third one, this is the examples we love, is a regional startup. If you haven't heard of Zevia, they're worth checking out. They started in Seattle and then moved to LA. All of their sodas in frustration-free packaging. And I bought a case, it looked just like that image I had up a little bit ago. Each 6-pack is in its own little cell that's protected, so it arrives totally drinkable and undamaged and ready to go. If you search for coffee on Peapod, it's a regional, that's New England Coffee that's up there. If you search for cookies, it's bakery. If you search for snacks on Amazon, that's a third-party seller. So in a lot of categories, the third parties or regional brands, those niche brands, have found a way to get themselves to the top of search. So you really have to have that conscious effort. What is your strategy? What are the keywords that you want to own? And what's it going to take to get there? So menu, which we talked about, and I hope that this probably won't come across for the back of the room, but Amazon's done something really interesting with coffee. So as I was looking for an example for this slide, I found this one and was absolutely delighted. So just for coffee, if you just look at best sellers in coffee, they're all K-Cups, the first 6. Makes sense, it ships really well, the value equation is right, it's all there. But if you look at how this has been broken down, after you get past gifts, ground and instant, you've got 4 options for single serve: capsules, cups, discs, and pods. And what's super interesting about that is each of those is what a specific brand refers to as their product. They're all single serve, and this could have just been single serve. But at some point it made sense for them to split it out. But then take a look at what actually happened. When you look at capsules, which is the Nestle product, Nespresso, just got one of these machines and it's awesome. Of the top 6 results, 2 of them are actually a K-Cup view. This is a Keurig view refillable cup. Right? So these guys, either by accident or deliberately, have found their way into the top 6 results for something that should be all Nespresso products. K-Cups are good. All 6 are K-Cup. Single-serve discs, which is Tassimo. All 6 are Tassimo, great. Then we get to pods, which should be all Sensio. We have a ground product in Lavazza. We have a ground product in Kicking Horse Coffee. And then you have a K-Cup in the top right. So the point here is menu navigation is really critical. The retailers are working on this and want to help those who are searching. The key is that your product is where it should be when they go looking for it there. You really don't want it. I mean, these guys have it's either an error or they've kind of hijacked the system to get themselves there. Long term, it won't stick, and Amazon will eventually clean this up, as will the other retailers. So there's not necessarily a strategy to get to where you shouldn't be, but you do want to absolutely be where you should be and where the shoppers are looking for your product. At the end of the day, this is a bad shopper experience, because if somebody clicks on pods, they're expecting all results to be pods. Okay, so let's talk about price and profitability for just a minute. And this is one where universally we see, well, there's really nothing we can do about price. Across the 4 Ps, this is the one I can't influence. The retailer sets the price, it's at their sole discretion. Except that every now and again price drops, and we may or may not have seen this on occasion where your price online is significantly below, odds are everybody in this room has gotten that email from somebody very senior that says, how can this product be selling for 30% below Walmart's price? Walmart's threatening to cut distribution. Call Amazon and tell them to fix it. Right, like that's going to happen. So what can you do about it? Well, it's important to understand what's happening in the online ecosystem. This is the model we all know. You manufacture your product. I have really cool sound effects that aren't working, so I'm sorry, but it goes bloop, bloop, bloop. Manufacture your product, pushes product out to your retailers, your distributors, and your wholesalers. There was a time where that worked just great. You had some excess product, you liquidated it through your job lot and whoever it may be, product moves through and everybody's happy. Well, what's happening is now we have marketplaces and the product starts to trickle down into the marketplaces and it shows up on eBay and it shows up on Amazon Marketplace, and we have Rakuten who's come in, we've got Alibaba who's entering, Sears has a marketplace, Walmart's got a marketplace now, so if you haven't checked out Walmart lately, you might want to see what your distribution looks like on walmart.com when you include marketplace. And through the power of mobile, which Gary talked about up front, all of it is now totally visible and transparent to the shopper who's standing in line. As an aside, it's worth noting that some manufacturers choose to deliberately distribute into marketplace channels. It's something we can talk about a separate time, but this is something to consider. If you can't beat them, join them. Should you have a presence on eBay, for example, as opposed to letting eBay sellers own your brand presence. So what's driving all this? At the end of the day, think about the marketplace like the stock market. It's all about supply and demand. If there's too much supply out there that outstrips demand, price is going to drop. And I always think about allergy season, where we used to pump out tons and tons of displays, and at the end of allergy season, every retailer was left with a couple thousand displays, and what do they do? It goes on the wire, and who knows who picks it up, and it ends up with these third-party sellers. It ends up on eBay, and it ends up on Amazon Marketplace, and the price starts to drop because they got it for pennies on the dollar. I've seen examples where demand exceeds supply, which is always a great position to be in, and those manufacturers have complete, I don't want to say control over price, because that's a dangerous combination of words, but they're able to be successful with their pricing strategy in bringing it into the online space. It's a very tough thing to do because nobody wants to say pull back on manufacturing. Nobody wants to say we're supplying the market with too much, but I have seen brands take an active role in this space and say we've got to fix pricing or we're going to lose the entire business. Not fixed pricing like fixed price, but we've got to fix our pricing problem. No one's recording this, right? The microphone's off. Yeah, no, he's saying no. And so it's just important to think about that. So if price is an issue, there actually are ways to take an active role in solving for this. And then finally, I told you I'd come back to ratings and reviews. Nice visual here we've got in the coffee aisle. Little shelf tags, hang tags. There's a display at the end of the aisle. Now let's take a look at coffee. Is one of my favorite categories. So besides hair care, I talk about coffee a lot. So this is actually midway down the search this is search for coffee. Again, I'm picking on Amazon because they're really easy to pick on. I've searched for coffee. It's about halfway down the page. And what have I got for those who can't see? I've got a Dunkin' Donuts. I've got 8 o'clock coffee K-Cup, Maxwell House Donut Shop K-Cup. And just because I want to be able to say this out loud, Coffee Bitch Slap Extra Strong and Extra Smooth High Caffeine Coffee, and Cafe Du Monde. There's also a great Kicking Horse Kick-Ass Coffee that I like to bring in sometimes too. So what am I talking about? If you're scrolling through and you're saying, I'm really not happy with my coffee, I need to pick out a new brand. This Maxwell House Prime Pantry, 4 stars, it has 8 reviews. Now Prime Pantry's new, so we're going to cut them a little bit of slack here, but compare this to what else is going on the page. This Dunkin' Donuts product, which is quite high priced per ounce, 3.5 stars, it's got 9 reviews. I'm also going to be like, I don't know about those reviews. Coffee Bitch Slap Extra Strong and Extra Smooth High Caffeine Coffee, I got to say it again, 21 reviews. Cafe Du Monde, I actually just learned what Cafe Du Monde is. It's one of the best places to get beignets in New Orleans. I just saw a movie called Chef a couple nights ago. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie, and they visit Cafe Du Monde and get beignets, and I was like, hey, that's in my presentation next week. It's got 111 reviews. Now, these are probably largely organic because it's probably got a very loyal and active following, people who just love this coffee. They love Cafe Du Monde. They want to go online and talk about it. Here's 8 o'clock coffee with 385, and Original Donut Shop, 3,364 reviews. For what it's worth, this probably didn't happen by accident. They've a couple things. One, this is one of the oldest K-Cup products that's been on Amazon, because for as long as I can remember, that's been the number 1 result. They've probably done a lot to cultivate those reviews from among their users and to kind of encourage them to go online. But at the end of the day, this has just been one of those items that's been around forever, and it continues to build and add to reviews. So my overall message is, if you're looking at this shelf set, and let's forget about form for a minute, that some are beans and some are ground and some are K-Cup, this is the one with 4.5 stars and 3,000 reviews that I'm going to click into and read about. I'm going to read the 1-star reviews to find out why people don't like it and see if it applies to me. I'm going to read the 5-star reviews to see if I agree with them, and the others I might give consideration. Personally, I actually really want to try the Café du Monde. And the fact, if that product had 5 reviews, I wouldn't even click on it. But the 111 reviews tell me that there's something special about this product. So my overall message here is, think about ratings and reviews as an opportunity to interrupt the trip and really distinguish yourself on that online shelf. Okay, so finally, engaging content. So I'm going to take a break and catch my breath for a minute. Uh-oh.
Peter, come take a look at this.
Look at this.
The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
The clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
Take a look at football.
Everything about football right now.
He really loves that thing.
All right, so what's the overall message here? Right content in the right place at the right time, and making sure that you really know what message you're delivering, that you're engaging the right shopper, and of course, you know, the ultimate punchline here, that you've got the right metrics and you're looking at them the right way to understand the business and how to influence it. So hopefully I've sort of built up the case here, and if anybody wasn't completely convinced before coming in the room about how we can take the principles of online management, online category management, and use these wonderful Clavis metrics that most folks in the room already have at their disposal to take a much more proactive and controlled approach to online category management. It's no longer fix it and forget it. The endless aisle days are coming to an end. We've really got to be conscious about how we set our shelf. I think we've still got a little bit of time, so what I want to do is do a quick case study. And I deliberately chose a category and market that won't apply to anybody in the room, so that I don't face any competitive issues. And actually a really fun category that we've had a lot of fun exploring. And what's that?
Is that Diageo?
It is not Diageo, but it could apply to them as well. So anyway, case study on spirits in the UK, a really great category to be working in. So let's just take a look through our 5 metrics and how we would actually apply category management to it. So share of shelf by brand. So, you know, first of all, taking a look at each of the key retailers and saying, well, how am I doing versus my competitors? I realize you can't read it, but blue is Jack Daniel's, doing really well on Ocado, okay on Sainsbury and Asda and Tesco. But when you look at store brand, boo. Store brand on Sainsbury, Asda, and Tesco, really starting to gain share, particularly on Asda and Tesco. So you can start to say, wow, even in the online space, I've got to face this in growing and increasing threat of own label and make sure that I understand what that share of shelf looks like. The way to do that is to take a look at portfolio by brand and say, well, I've got 6 of my products on Ocado. I'm just pretending I'm Jack Daniel's, which I'm actually not. But let's say I'm Jack Daniel's, 6, 5, 6, and 4. And the question is, if I've only got 4 on Tesco but 6 here, are there 2 that I should be carrying here? So performing that gap analysis, and I would really say as well, thinking about what are your must stocks and having a deliberate strategy around it. So first of all, in this particular category, focusing on click and collect, alcohol doesn't really ship very well. And establish a must-stock strategy that you're going to push across retailers. Now, it's not to say that the must-stocks has to be the same. It's not to say that the same 10 has to be on every site, but it's understanding the retailer strategy and picking the right 10 for that retailer. It could be the 35 centiliter Jameson, it could be the 70 centiliter Jameson. It just depends on what the retailer strategy and who the shopper is. We go to availability. This is actually, for whatever boring reason, one of my favorite topics. Staying in stock online is just a really big challenge, and it's for all the reasons I articulated up front with the little flowing charts with the shelf. In this particular case, at the moment it was captured, there was only 25 products in the sample set that we were looking at, but only 72% were available online, which means those others might as well not exist. If the shopper goes online to learn about it and read about it, you've completely missed that shopper. We dig into a little bit more. Our problem is at Tesco. We dig into it a little bit more, and I can't even remember the name of the brand. John might be here. I don't see John. This was one of their specialty brands that was, for whatever reason, showing as completely out of stock, and then we had one on Glenlivet, one on Aberlour, one on Chivas, and so on. So the implication here is really understanding, and in this case it was right after a holiday period, so understanding how holiday drives demand spikes and monitoring for those low inventory levels. This is just not something that a lot of the particularly brick and mortar retailers are thinking about. They sort of have a case or two in the key places that they need to have it, and they're not really thinking about demand spikes until it's too late, or you're stuck in that cycle where it sells out and then the demand isn't there, so they don't order enough, and then it sells out and their demand isn't there, so they're still not ordering enough. So a lot of what we're starting to see is customers take our data into the retailer and show them the spikes and dips and say, this is why you need to double the amount of inventory you carry. I can show you the historical data on it and prove the case with data as to why they need to increase it. Odds are they've never looked at it in that detail, and they'll be very grateful to you for having brought that in. Share of search, I think this one's kind of obvious, but I'm just going to jump to the punchline on this one. First of all, the right shopper terms. I'll pick on them a little bit because the shopper terms that we had in here was buy Irish whiskey, buy Scotch whiskey, buy single malt. And whiskey, by the way, has two different spellings if you didn't know. I never realized it, but one with an E and one without. You first of all want to pick the right search terms. A lot of times we'll see starting with like 100 search terms, but do you want to actually cultivate that down to the 10 that you really care about? Whiskey, Scotch, something like that. And then really understand what your share of those search terms are. We're going to hear more about the sophistication that's coming on search tomorrow. So there's a lot more coming in that space, but understanding what that looks like versus your competitors. So make sure you've got the right search terms, ensure tags are up to date, and refresh content. So this is the other piece of it is, if you're thinking about the category and the shopper goes online and they just search vodka and you have a vodka brand that doesn't come up, again, you've missed that opportunity. So, and the retailers aren't really thinking about that category approach. They're not always thinking about making sure that all of their vodka products are tagged with the word vodka. And we've actually saw examples in the UK where out of 330 results, a brand of vodka didn't turn up at all in any of the results on the search term vodka. So bringing those, it seems very fundamental, but it's a category insight that the word vodka should be tagged on all vodka products. So those are some of the data points that you can bring there. Price monitoring really gets interesting here. It depends on what you want to do with it and what your internal point of view is. Some people just don't want to look at it. Others have a much more active strategy. For one, have found price to just be super interesting just to see strategy. So again, it's totally washed out, but this is the same product on 4 different retailer sites, and it's like 5 or 6 different brands. So in this case, this brand here is super premium, but when I jump over to this one, it's actually like right in the middle of the pack. So how is each retailer using each of the brands within their category? What's the premium, super premium, low price player? And is that what's right for your equity? And again, a lot of times it might just be that somebody set the price and didn't really think about it or really apply the same category management principles that you've worked really hard to deliver in the offline world, but online they just set it up and didn't really think that through. So bringing those insights can be really critical. And then of course monitoring what's happening with price over time can give you insight into what's happening with promotion along with the media tracker metric, but what's the role of brands and monitoring both yours and competitive for promotional opportunities. As we go towards ratings and reviews, I think this one's fairly self-explanatory, but it's always fun to actually read some reviews, especially in this category. So this person wrote, "There are better. Pretty bog standard sherried whiskey, not offensive, not complex. Prices overinflated 20 years ago. Regular offers meant it could be had for a little more than bells. There are better whiskeys at today's price point." So here's an example, say, oh, it's somebody who's been in the, probably drinks too much, I don't know, doesn't really care what they're drinking, and we can just ignore it. Or you can take it as an opportunity to give feedback to your marketing and say, hey, look, we're being compared to Bell's. And by the way, let's give it over to customer service and actually post a reply and say, actually, I'd like to teach you about why we are a superior product. Please feel free to visit our site or give some examples or give us a call. We'd love to talk to you. And then there's this one on Jameson. I've tried a lot of different whiskey brands, both single malt and blended, in a wide variety of price ranges. I keep coming back to Jameson Irish Whiskey. It's my favorite with a U. I love to drink it in a tall glass of ice topped with ginger ale with a squeeze and a slice of lime. In fact, I've just made myself very thirsty and I'm off to have one now. Cheers. My question is, who at the brand wrote that review? But it actually could be a very engaged shopper who's actually like just given some information on recipes. And again, a really great review and one that makes a great example for how shoppers are actually thinking about and using the brand. So reviews are not something to just be ignored. Respond to negative reviews. I'm very happy to see more and more customers doing this, where the tool is there to actually go online from the point of view of the manufacturer. I'm sorry you've had a bad experience. Please call customer service. I actually just got an email about an hour ago on a shelf I was looking for, and the manufacturer responded and said, sorry, this was cross-listed with the wrong product. Here's the right model number. Please go and order it. And I will go home tonight and I'm going to order that shelf. So there's an opportunity here to create engagement and upsell. And if your reviews are low and it's appropriate for the category, there's a lot of programs out there. So there's Vine, there's Bazaar Voice. We were talking yesterday about Buzz Agent in certain markets and the role that they have. And then gleaning those reviews for shopper insights and to really understand what shoppers are saying. I had a client once in a prior role where they launched a new product and we got a frantic call. All our reviews are 1 star on every retailer. How do we get them off the site? How do we fix it? I said, well, you can't, but you probably need to figure out what's wrong with your product really quickly and get that information over to R&D as fast as possible and figure out how to correct this in the market before the entire launch is completely scrubbed. Content integrity. So in this case, I was picking on Jameson Irish Whiskey. Maybe you figured out manufacturer by now. In this particular case on Tesco, there's 70 centiliter. They had no description except for triple distilled, matured and bottled in Ireland. No warnings or directions, no ingredients, no manufacturer details. And in Europe, this becomes even more critical than it is here. Their 35 centiliter actually had a really nice description on it. So it's an interesting example where the content was in place even on Tesco, but not on that particular item, which was by far the most popular. And if you go over to Ocado, this brand actually has all the product. I mean, all the content information. All your nutritionals here, all your warnings are here, all your description. This is just a matter of somebody needing to go over to Tesco and giving them the content saying, can you please add this to your site? We have it ready to go. So first of all, we always say prioritize the fundamentals. This will vary on your e-commerce strategy. If you're all about content and engagement, then above the fold might not be as important as below the fold. But generally speaking, get your fundamentals in place. Make sure that the most basic information at least is consistent across your retailers. And then you can start to get your customized and engaging content below the fold based on the retailer and the retailer's customer. This is an example on Ocado where they've actually added enhanced content. So a competitor brand, in this case, Southern Comfort, had 5 different recipes for mixed drinks that you could make with Southern Comfort. And by the way, Southern Comfort and Jack Daniels were showing up as the top results for whiskey, and they're not really whiskeys. So it's kind of interesting how those brands have done a really nice job in this particular market, kind of owning whiskey in spite of the fact that they don't necessarily play in that market. I'm getting really excited for cocktail hour. Is it just me or what? So I've got one little bullet here, e-commerce ready content. A lot of times there's some education. I bet everybody in the room knows exactly what I'm talking about here and where I'm going, but marketing needs education on this. They assume that they can take the content from their website, hand it over to you and say, give that to Peapod, give that to Amazon, give it to Walmart, but you can't. It's not written in the right voice, it's not written with the right audience, it's not written to drive conversion. So you really have to work with marketing to say, our digital marketing strategy now needs to include an e-commerce content strategy. It can be the same content, but it needs to be translated. And then it'll be acceptable and it'll work much more effectively for you in the e-commerce space. Okay, how am I doing on time? Am I out? Okay, good, let me wrap up. 30 more seconds? Okay. So from insights to action, you take your beautiful Clavis metrics, pull out the insights, and I just want to call out there's probably one more step there that I'm actually going to talk about tomorrow, and that's what comes after you've got your metrics and your insights and converting that into action plans. So hopefully everybody will be with us tomorrow. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more depth. And finally, 3 parting thoughts. E-commerce is tipping. Take a leadership role. The companies represented in this room are the leaders in this space, and e-commerce is being defined. So don't feel limited by what's there now. Think about how this space can evolve and help drive that change and that leadership. I know Peapod, for one, has always been a great partner and is open to those ideas and wants to hear them. Other retailers have different levels of openness to it, but think about it, how to make things work. Do it through the retailer lens, but take that leadership role. Think across the path to purchase and think about the end user experience. Remember that winning offline starts with winning online. So I always like to point that out. You got to get your content right in order to drive that impact at shelf. And last, of course, what does the endless aisle mean for you and your company? And my last point on this is what the shopper's been trained to shop from birth. Then they went with their parents to the store, and they've got kids now, and they're going to the store and they're walking these aisles. This is nothing like the online shopping experience. The online shopping experience is one item at a time. So think about what this means for your company and how you can bring those kinds of insights into how to make the shopping experience ever better. And I think that's taking a very conscious effort to online category management and bringing those principles in with great ideas and strategies on how we can make a better shopping experience and accelerate growth even faster. Okay, thank you.